And so Paul is doing this with the people in Rome. He's asking questions to get them to think and begin to process and begin to go through things. And he begins, verse 1, what's the advantage of being a Jew? He says, is there any value in the ceremony of circumcision? And he says, yes, there are great benefits. First of all, the Jews were entrusted with the whole revelation of God. Circumcision was something that set them apart as being different from those around them. And then God also gave them the covenant of the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is the foundation upon which the New Testament is situated. And so everything that we have in the New Testament is built upon the promises and the precepts and the principles of the Old Testament. So we don't throw the Old Testament away. We recognize that some of the laws were moral laws, and those are still valuable. Some of the laws were ceremonial, and some were civil. And they were meant to help them get along with each other as a community. They were meant to kind of set them apart from the people around them. And some of those things, went away when Jesus came and established the new covenant. But we value the principles that come as a result of the things that we learn from the stories and the episodes that we read about in the Old Testament. So the Old Testament has great value. And if you read the New Testament, they're always reaching back and alluding to the Old Testament because that had value for them. So if anyone tells you that the Old Testament isn't worth anything, they don't know what they're talking about. They're doing something else. So embrace it, read it, understand it, get to know it better. And as you look at Romans 3, as we go through it, you'll see that what the Apostle Paul does, is he alludes back to the Old Testament over and over again. And if you want to know anything about like the book of Revelation, the book of Revelation alludes to the Old Testament over 425 times. It doesn't quote the Old Testament, it alludes to concepts and precepts. So if you want to understand the Revelation, you need to be familiar with what the Old Testament says.